Dorsai by Gordon R. Dickson. So this is episode 41 of a series I'm doing called The Masterpieces of Science Fiction, and it's 140 books that I'm reading through and doing a video review for each one of them. Now, this book was copyright 1960, but it was serialized before that in the magazine Astounding Science Fiction, and that copyright was like 1959. The original title of this book was The Genetic General, and then later at some point it was changed to Dorsai with an exclamation point. Now, right around the same time that this book came out, another book came out called Starship Troopers by Robert A. Heinlein. And the reason I bring this up is both of these books are kind of considered to be very influential and almost pillars of military science fiction. But I think they're quite a bit different. Now, I have not read this one yet. I remember seeing the movie a long time ago. But this book is also in this series that I'm doing, so eventually I will be reading this, and it'll be kind of interesting to compare the two. Now, also in this copy, I have this Ace paperback from 1980, and it has an afterword by Sandra Meisel. And if you look here, this whole back section, this is all the afterwords, and it goes into quite a bit of depth. And I realized a lot of things after reading the book and then getting into this afterwards. One very interesting thing is this book, Dorsai, is part of this Childe Cycle that Gordon R. Dickson came up with. And it was going to be this big, I think at the time when he came up with it, there was going to be maybe 12 books, but I think it's grown beyond that. So he had this in mind, that this was going to be just this big series. And what's really interesting is he got the inspiration for this from a Robert Browning poem called Childe Roland to the Dark Tower Came. And most of you might recognize that because that's also the inspiration for Stephen King's The Dark Tower. This was one of the first series I ever read. It's what got me into Stephen King, science fiction, fantasy. It was very influential in my reading career, if you want to call it that. And so I did not know that this came out well before Stephen King wrote Dark Tower, but they both got inspiration from that poem, but it seems like they went in completely different directions, which is pretty cool. So with that out of the way, let's kind of get into the book. So this book follows pretty much the whole time with one character, and his name is Donal. It's Donal. I think I'm pronouncing that right. Donal. And he is one of these Dorsai. And so in this galaxy we're in the future, mankind has kind of broken up into three main factions. I think they're spread out over around like 12 solar systems, but there's three main factions. You have the Dorsai, who are kind of these warriors. You have friendlies, who are kind of this religious sect. And you have these exotics, who are kind of like philosophers in a way. And so each one of them serves a role in this greater humanity, but they all require one another to kind of make it through and to kind of collectively form this whole society in a way. And it makes a lot of sense now, this Childe Cycle. You kind of see where he's going to take this, because humanity is a bit fractured, and and I'm speculating, but I seem to think that maybe they're going to come together in some fashion at some point. But since all of these worlds and factions in a way are separated, they require one another to get by, and they use contracts to accomplish this. And these contracts are very important. They're very hard to break once they're formed, not only physically, but like politically. You're kind of stuck into these contracts. And so when we start this novel, we start off with our main character, Donal, and he's on his home world of Dorsai. and he's hanging out with his dad, who's kind of a big figure on the planet, and some of his uncles and his brothers, and they're kind of discussing what's kind of happened with their planet, and they're low on resources, so they've always kind of farmed themselves out to maybe do battles or whatever the case may be, but they're kind of talking about how they're forced to almost become security guards at this point, and they're thinking, is this what we really come to, you know? And so Donald, he is right at that age where he's getting ready for his coming of age. He's going to go out into the galaxy and figure out his own way and how he fits. And we realize pretty quickly he's a little different. His mom came from one of these exotic worlds where they're philosophers and they have kind of unique abilities or powers. It's kind of vague. And just in general, you're thrown into this book without a lot of background, but it's not hard to understand. It's pretty easy to understand, but you don't get a lot of background on all this stuff. So you end up having to kind of speculate on how some of this either came about or how it works. And so after we get that set up with Donald on his homeworld, the next chapter we kind of find him on this starship, and it's under the command of one of these religious figures and from one of these friendlies. And this person's very important on his planet. I think maybe like the top person, and you don't know why Donald really is there, or maybe I missed that part, but there's also an exotic female who's from this philosopher world who's kind of under contract with this religious guy. And right away, she kind of comes up to Donald and says, I need help breaking this contract. I don't want to be working for this guy anymore. And you realize how important these contracts are. There's a lot of gravity in this situation, and you expect, or I expected Donald to kind of, help her out. Now, he went a completely different way, and this is the theme of this book. It's Donald being put in these difficult situations that he's got to figure his way out of. You start to realize, he's going to win most of these situations or come out ahead, but the way he goes about it is very unique. And that's what really threw me off in this book. When I looked at this cover and I knew this was military science fiction, I'm thinking this is going to be pew pew laser gun battles, but it's not really that at all. There's a couple little battle scenes, but that's not the focus of this book at all. It's mostly about Donald making these very tactical decisions, almost like playing a chess game. And it's very unpredictable the way he overcomes some of these obstacles. But like I said, you kind of realize he's going to win all these things. He is a Superman. And that's probably my biggest complaint of this book, is just that he can't lose, So other than that, the writing, and that's all I really want to go over with the plot. The book just kind of follows his career as he advances and gains more and more power, and it's good. It keeps you guessing. It moves along. There is no fluff in this book at all. It maybe looks like a little bit of a longer book here, but the words on the page are big. The pages must be thick. It was only 275 pages, and I read it in basically a couple days. It was very easy to understand. Even though he wasn't spoon feeding you all the information of what's going on, you could kind of piece it all together really quickly and see what was going on. I had no issues, reading this. And getting into the future of this series for me, when I was reading this, I was just thinking, okay, this is pretty neat. It's different than I thought, but I don't really know if I'm going to go on with this series because, like I said, I think there's like 20 books. But then after reading the afterwards and knowing that he kind of took inspiration from that Robert Browning poem, and seeing where he's going with this, I am definitely curious to keep reading for a while. Like, we'll see if I probably am either going to love the series or hate it. I do have the second book in the series, so at some point I'm going to grab that and give it a read and see how far I'll go in this series. It was a great palate cleanser of a book. It read really fast. It was kind of fun. It is fun reading about a superhero in a way that can kind of never lose. You know, I don't like every story to be like that, but and I kind of wonder how he takes this series if that kind of changes. But overall, this was good. I'm gonna give it 3 stars. The book itself, you know, maybe didn't completely wow me, but the idea, the concept, and looking forward, I am intrigued, and I probably will keep reading through the series for a while. And that's it for that. And next, I'm on to Empire of Two Worlds by Barrington J. Bailey. And this is another quick, short read. I just started it and already loving it. It's very unique and different. So just look for that video review coming out next. And once again, thanks for watching.